Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really trying to pinpoint a moment, maybe the moment when information changed, from this tiny stream for just a few people to something for almost everyone.
We're diving into Johannes Gutenberg.
Quite a name.
It really grounds you, doesn't it? Right there in the 15th century Holy Roman Empire. And when you dig into the material on Gutenberg, it's just so much more than he invented the printing press.
Right.
Our goal here is to unpack the actual tech, the brutal financial side of things, the politics in Mainz that kind of forced his hand. He had to reveal a whole system, you see.
It wasn't just about printing words.
No, it was about industrializing knowledge. That's the key.
That's a really important way to put it. We're not just looking at some guy perfecting one gadget. This is someone pulling together metalworking, chemistry, mechanics, typography, all into the basis for mass communication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Many historians call it the most important invention of the second millennium. And yet, his own life, so much financial trouble, almost obscurity personally. It's quite the contrast.
To really get it, you have to picture that world. Books were these rare treasures, took ages to copy by hand.
Painstaking work. You flip that script completely. Scarcity became abundance. But like you said, it all started in this environment of, conflict and maybe disappointment in Mainz.
Okay, let's start there. Mainz. And that name, Johannes Gutenberg, it wasn't just fancy, was it?
No, it literally told you where his family lived or had lived, including the Hofs of Gutenberg. Puts him squarely in the patrician class, the sort of upper crust of Mainz society.
And Mainz was a powerful city back then. Wealthy, right on the Rhine.
Absolutely. Now, his exact birth year, that's a bit fuzzy. Somewhere between 1393 and 1406, maybe. People often just say 1400 makes it easier.
Okay.
But his dad, Friedrich Gänzfleisch, he was definitely a big deal. A patrician, probably a cloth merchant, and importantly, he was part of the minting house cooperative, the Münzerhausgenossenschaft.
So money, power, influence, the family was right in the middle of it.
Sounds like a smooth path for young Johannes, right? Son of a patrician merchant. But here's the twist, the thing that really changed his life. His mother, Else Weyrich.
Yes. This is crucial.
It really is. Friel married Else, but she wasn't from a patrician family. Her father was a shopkeeper, a commoner. And in 15th century Mainz, that mattered a lot.
So because his mother wasn't from the elite class?
Johannes couldn't follow his father into the mint. That prestigious, probably very profitable position closed off to him. Despite his birthright on his father's side, despite the education he would have had, he was locked out of that top tier.
Wow. So not exactly poor, but definitely an outsider in some ways, stuck just outside the inner circle of inherited power.
Sort of high society adjacent, yeah. And some historians argue that this very exclusion, this lack of a clear, easy path, is what pushed him towards invention. He had to make his own way.
Makes sense. Find a different route to success or influence.
And adding to that sense of maybe instability. The whole patrician class he belonged to, they were constantly clashing with the guilds, the craftsmen.
This wasn't just debates, right? This was serious conflict.
Oh, yeah. Violent power struggles over who controlled the city politically and economically. It wasn't abstract at all.
And it got so bad, the family actually had to leave Mainz.
They did, twice, in fact. In 1411, and then again around 1413 because of the hunger riots. The Gutenbergs, along with other patrician families, basically fled upriver to Eltville for safety.
That kind of upheaval must leave a mark. Maybe makes you value skills over status.
Could well be. Relying on yourself, on what you can do, rather than just who your family is. That period of exile probably taught him something about that.
Okay, so that's the turbulent background. What about his education? Given the family's standing, he must have had some formal learning.
Well, this is where it gets tricky. There's a real gap in the historical record. His youth. Almost completely undocumented. Biographers often have to kind of, skim over it.
Frustrating for us trying to piece it together.
Very. But we can make some educated guesses based on his class. He definitely would have learned to read, do arithmetic, and Latin, absolutely essential for university or any kind of higher learning back then.
Any speculation about specific schooling? Maybe a religious path?
It's possible. Sometimes younger sons were steered towards the church. There was a well-regarded school at St. Victor's nearby. Maybe he attended there. It's plausible.
But the first real hint of higher education comes a bit later, linked to Eltville.
That's the main clue we have. There's an enrollment record from the University of Erfurt, dated 1418. It lists a student named Johannes de Altavilla.
Altavilla, Latin for Eltville am Rhine.
Exactly. It strongly suggests our Gutenberg went to university. Which makes sense, right? for the kind of complex thinking his later work required.
So after university, the trail picks up again, but not in Mainz. He's in Strasbourg in the 1430s, and this decade seems eventful.
Oh, Strasbourg is where things get really interesting. He's there from about 1434 to 1444. He had relatives there, which probably helped him get settled. And we know he was officially enrolled in the city militia as a goldsmith.
Goldsmithing. That points directly to skills with metal. Crucial for what's coming.
Absolutely foundational. And he wasn't just a basic metal worker. By 1437, court records show him teaching a wealthy tradesman how to polish gems. So, fine craftsmanship, metallurgy, he clearly had diverse skills.
And there's personal drama, too, a lawsuit about marriage.
Yeah, a little glimpse into his personal life. Around 1436 or 37, he was sued by a woman named Annelyn over a broken promise in marriage. We don't know much more, but it shows he was, living a life.
But the big story from Strasbourg, the one that really echoes later, is a massive business failure, right?
The mirror disaster. Around 1439. This is a key moment.
Tell us about it. Polished metal mirrors and holy light.
It sounds a bit strange now, but yeah. He got investors together for a scheme to mass-produce polished metal mirrors. The idea was pilgrims going to Aachen for this huge, once-in-a-generation pilgrimage could use these mirrors to capture holy light from the relics.
Okay, ambitious.
Very. But then disaster struck. Not metaphorical disaster, actual disaster. A massive flood hit the region, and the whole pilgrimage was postponed for a year.
Oh, no.
Exactly. All the money was already spent. Materials, labor. And suddenly, no market for the mirrors for a whole year. He couldn't pay back his investors. Lawsuits followed. It was a financial catastrophe for him.
So flat broke, reputation may be damaged. What does he do?
This is where we see the inventor emerge from the failed entrepreneur. Right around 1440, in the shadow of this mirror fiasco, his research into what would become printing gets this intriguing, almost coded name. Inventor und Kunst.
Enterprise and art.
Yeah. It signals something big, right? Not just tinkering.
Yep.
A secret high-stakes venture. He saw printing, potentially, as both a technical art form and a serious business. Maybe that mirror failure taught him he needed a product with more reliable demand than holy light, like, say, knowledge itself.
Okay, let's get into the invention itself. Now, it's important to clarify, right? Movable type wasn't brand new globally. It existed in East Asia.
That's a crucial point. People in China and Korea had experimented with porcelain and even metal movable type centuries earlier. But Gutenberg's genius wasn't just the type. It was the whole system he built around it for the Latin alphabet.
A system designed for mass production in a European context.
Exactly. His breakthrough was integrating several key technologies into one efficient, reproducible process. It was a combination that was revolutionary.
So what were the core components of this system? Let's break it down.
Okay, fundamentally, you need 5 things he really nailed. First, the press itself. He adapted the screw press mechanism, the kind used for making wine or pressing olives. Simple, powerful, effective. The ink. He needed something different from the water-based inks scribes used. He developed an oil-based ink, probably varnish-based, that would stick properly to metal type and transfer cleanly to paper.
Okay, press, ink. What else?
Third, a way to make lots and lots of identical pieces of type, the letters themselves. This is the mass production challenge. Fourth, related to that, an adjustable hand mold. This tool was key for casting those identical letters quickly and consistently.
And the fifth element, you mentioned this was critical.
The type metal itself. The actual alloy he used to cast the letters. This was arguably his most significant material innovation.
Right, the blend of lead, tin, and antimony.
Why those specific metals? What made that combination work so well? It was brilliant metallurgy, really. Lead formed the bulk. It's cheap, soft, melts easily. Tin was added because it helps the molten metal flow better, getting into all the tiny details of the letter mold, the matrix.
Okay, so lead for bulk, tin for flow. What about the antimony? That's the secret ingredient, isn't it?
That's the genius part. Antimony has this peculiar property. Unlike most metals, it expands slightly when it cools and solidifies.
Expands? Why is that good? Wouldn't you want it to shrink tight?
You'd think so, but no. If the metal shrank, even a tiny bit, the edges of the letter would pull away from the mold, become rounded, less distinct. You'd lose the sharpness needed for clear text. The antimony's expansion pushed the metal firmly into every corner of the matrix as it cooled, ensuring a perfect, crisp, sharp-edged letter every single time.
Wow. That slight expansion made all the difference for readability and quality.
Absolutely. And the whole alloy melted at a relatively low temperature, which meant faster casting, less fuel needed. So it was economical too. Durable, sharp, quick to make that alloy unlock the mass production potential. It was a materials science revolution driving a communication revolution.
Okay, so he's got the concept, the material science figured out. By 1448, he's back in Mainz, he gets a loan. And by 1450, we start seeing actual printed items, like a German poem.
Yes, the first tangible outputs start appearing. He's clearly got a workshop up and running.
But even the standard way we think of making type, the hard steel punch, hammered into a softer copper matrix to create the mold, even that might not be the whole story for his earliest work, right? There's some debate.
There is. The punch and matrix system definitely became the standard later on. You carve the letter backwards on a steel punch, hammer it into copper, and that copper matrix is your reusable mold. Perfect for identical letters.
Guarantees uniformity. But what did researchers find when they looked really closely at his first printed pages using modern tech?
Well, around 2001, some detailed analysis suggested there were subtle but persistent irregularities in some of the letters. Even simple things like hyphens or periods weren't always perfectly identical. More variation than you'd expect just from ink smudges or type wearing down.
So if they weren't perfectly identical, maybe they weren't all coming from the same permanent copper mold.
That's the implication, which leads to this really interesting, though debated, hypothesis, the soft mold or sand casting theory for his earliest work.
Okay, walk us through that. How would a soft mold have worked?
The idea is that maybe, just maybe, for his very first attempts, he wasn't using durable copper matrices yet. Maybe he used a temporary mold made of something soft, like fine sand packed tightly or maybe plaster. He depressed the basic letter shape into this soft material.
Okay.
But here's the crucial difference. Casting the hot metal into that soft mold would likely destroy the mold itself. So if you needed, say, 100 letter E's, you'd have to make 100 individual soft molds.
One mold per letter cast. That sounds incredibly inefficient.
Massively inefficient compared to the reusable copper matrix.
No.
But it would explain those tiny variations they found in the earliest type. Each E might be slightly different because it came from a slightly different individually made temporary mold.
So it suggests his process evolved. He might have started with this clunky, laborious method while simultaneously working towards the more robust, efficient punch and matrix system.
Exactly. It paints a picture of invention as an iterative process. He didn't just wake up one day with the perfect system. He likely started with something that worked, even if inefficiently, maybe to prove the concept or get started, while constantly refining it towards the final brilliant solution. The journey was as important as the destination.
And speaking of journeys, getting any version of this off the ground needed serious cash. More than a failed mirror maker likely had.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't a cheap endeavor. Which brings us back to Johann Fust,
The moneylender.
the crucial financial backer. Fust clearly saw the potential in Gutenberg's Inventor and Kunst. He gave Gutenberg not one, but two significant loans, 800 guilders each.
1,600 guilders total. That was a fortune back then, wasn't it?
A huge sum. Enough to set up a proper workshop, buy materials, hire staff. This was serious venture capital, 15th century style. The loan started around 1450, 1452, really getting the Bible project underway at the workshop known as the Humbrickhof.
It wasn't just Fust's money, though. They also brought in key talent.
Yes. Peter Schoeffer. He's the third figure in this initial enterprise. Schoeffer was a skilled scribe, had trained in Paris, knew calligraphy and design. He joined the team, and many credit him with designing some of the beautiful typefaces they used, including for the Bible.
So you had the inventor, Gutenberg, the financier, Fust, and the designer-technician, Schoeffer. A powerful combination.
A real powerhouse team. But even with Fust's money, printing that massive Bible was a long, expensive project. Years of work. They couldn't just sit around waiting for that payoff.
They needed cash flow in the meantime.
Exactly. So while the Bible was slowly taking shape, the press was busy churning out other, more immediately profitable items. Things like Latin grammars, always in demand for schools.
Makes sense. Steady sellers.
And perhaps, ironically, given what came later, thousands and thousands of indulgences for the Catholic Church. We have records of these being printed between 1454 and 1455.
Wow. So the machine that would eventually fuel the Reformation started out printing the very things Luther would protest against.
Precisely. It shows the press was immediately seen as a powerful tool by the established powers, like the Church. It was a business, after all. Printing those indulgences kept the lights on and funded the work on the magnificent Bible project.
Okay, so the Bible Project.
No.
Around 1455, it's finally done. The famous 42-line Bible. About 180 copies made. Stunning quality. This wasn't just a book, it was a landmark. How did it immediately change things, say, for literacy or just the cost of knowledge?
The impact was profound, almost immediate. Think about it. Before Gutenberg, getting a Bible meant hiring a scribe for maybe a year, maybe longer, just for one copy. The cost was, well, astronomical, out of reach for almost everyone.
They had a printed Bible.
Still not cheap, maybe 30 florins. That's like, what, 3 years' wages for a clerk? So still a luxury item. But compare that to the cost and time of a manuscript Bible. It was a revolution in accessibility. Suddenly, a Bible wasn't a unique treasure locked away. It was a reproducible commodity, relatively speaking.
Cheaper, faster. But you also mentioned standardization earlier. That seems just as important as cost?
Absolutely crucial. With hand copying, errors creep in. Scribes might misread something, make a typo, even consciously change things. No two manuscript copies were ever perfectly identical.
But with printing,
every single copy pulled from that press, using the same set type, was exactly the same, page for page, line for line, letter for letter. This created a level of textual stability and authority that just hadn't existed before. Think about laws, scientific texts, religious doctrine. Suddenly, everyone could be working from the exact same text. No more arguing about whose copy was correct.
you can see how that would transform scholarship, education.
Definitely. And it wasn't just the Bible. Remember those Latin grammars they printed for cash flow? The Ars Minor was a standard school book. Printing thousands of identical copies meant students everywhere, from Mainz to Rome, could learn from the exact same material. It helped standardize education itself.
How did people react at the time? Were they immediately aware of how big this was?
There was definitely a sense of wonder. We have this great account from 1455 by Aeneas Silvius Piccolomini, who later became Pope Pius II. He saw pages from the Bible, possibly in Frankfurt, and wrote about this marvelous man.
What did he say specifically?
He was amazed by the quality. He said the script was incredibly neat, very legible, easy to read without effort, and indeed without glasses. That tells you the sharpness and clarity of Gutenberg's type thanks, antimony, was immediately recognized as superior. It wasn't just faster, it looked good.
So the technology is a triumph, recognized as revolutionary. But for Gutenberg personally, the story takes a really sharp downturn right here, doesn't it?
It's the tragic irony. Just as his masterpiece is completed, the financial reality hits home. Johann Fust, the backer, wanted his money back, with interest.
This is the infamous lawsuit.
The pivotal moment in 1456. Fust sued Gutenberg, not just for the original 1,600 guilders, but for accrued interest as well, 6% per year. The total demand was over 2,000 guilders. 2,026, I think?
An impossible sum for Gutenberg to repay.
Completely impossible. He'd poured everything into the workshop and the Bible project. Fust took him to court, the Archbishop's court, no less, and Fust won.
And the consequence?
Fust basically took everything. The entire workshop, the Humberkopf, the presses, the specialized type, even the stacks of nearly finished Bibles. Gutenberg was left bankrupt, stripped of the very tools of his life's work.
Unbelievable. The man who invents mass communication is essentially kicked out of his own communication business. What did Fust do then? Did he just shut it down?
Oh, no. Fust wasn't going to let that investment go to waste. He teamed up with Peter Schoeffer, the designer guy who'd been working with Gutenberg. They took over the whole operation. And
immediately put their own names on the products.
Almost immediately. In 1457, just a year after the lawsuit, the new Fust Schoeffer shop produced the Mainz Psalter. Beautiful book, famous in its own right. And significantly, it's the first European book to proudly display the printer's names and the date of publication.
But whose name was missing?
Gutenberg's. Completely omitted. They deliberately erased him from the picture in the very first book that claimed public credit for the new technology. It was a calculated move to secure the legacy and the profits for themselves.
A brutal business move. But despite Gutenberg's personal ruin, the technology itself, it couldn't be stopped, could it? Especially its impact on big ideas like religion.
No way.
Yeah.
The genie was out of the bottle, and its long-term impact was seismic. You really can't imagine the Renaissance reaching its full flower or the Reformation happening the way it did without the printing press. These movements depended on the rapid spread of ideas.
It became a tool for challenging the status quo almost immediately.
Absolutely. Think about Martin Luther, decades later. When he nailed his 95 Theses to the church door, that was a symbolic act. But the real impact came when those theses were printed and distributed.
How quickly did they spread?
Incredibly quickly. Within weeks, copies were circulating all over the German states. Before printing, that might have taken years, relying on hand copies passed from person to person. The press turned a local protest into a continental firestorm.
And Luther used it for more than just the theses.
Oh, yes. He was a master propagandist, in a way. His pamphlets, his broadsheets arguing against indulgences, the very things Gutenberg printed to make money, they flew off the presses. The printing press became the engine of the Reformation.
It's fascinating how those early religious pamphlets and news sheets basically laid the groundwork for newspapers, too.
Exactly. They showed the power of mass-produced, timely information or persuasion. It was the birth of mass media, shaping public opinion on a scale never seen before. All thanks to that system, Gutenberg hammered out through failure and financial stress.
So Gutenberg creates this unstoppable force, but ironically, its spread across Europe wasn't driven by his success, but by disaster in Mainz.
It's one of history's great paradoxes, isn't it? In 1462, there was intense political conflict in Mainz, culminating in Archbishop Adolf von Nassau basically sacking the city. It was violent, disruptive.
And many citizens were forced out.
Yes, including printers and craftsmen who had learned the new techniques, possibly even worked with Gutenberg or Fust and Schoeffer. Instead of the technology staying concentrated in Mainz, these skilled exiles scattered across Europe.
Taking the secrets of printing with them.
Exactly. They fled to places like Italy, France, other German cities. So this act of violence unintentionally became the accelerator for the printing revolution across the continent. The knowledge dispersed rapidly because its holders were forced to move.
Where did the new center of printing emerge after Mainz was disrupted?
Italy really took the lead, especially Venice. Venice was perfect for it. A major trading hub, already had a strong paper industry, wealthy patrons, a vibrant intellectual culture.
And key figures emerged there.
People like Aldus Manutius. He was a scholar printer in Venice who became hugely influential. He used the press to publish affordable, high-quality editions of Greek and Latin classics, making ancient knowledge widely available and really fueling the Renaissance. Italy's booming economy just helped it all take off.
It's amazing how quickly it permeated society. You mentioned Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, it's a great little detail showing the reach. Within just a few decades of the first Bible, printing was common enough that Christopher Columbus's father could buy him a printed geography book. It wasn't just for popes and kings anymore. It was reaching educated merchant families. That's fast adoption.
Now, despite being bankrupted and pushed out of his own workshop, Gutenberg himself did eventually get some recognition later in life, didn't he?
He did, thankfully. It wasn't riches, but it was recognition. In 1465, the very same Archbishop Adolf von Nassau, who had sacked Mainz, granted Gutenberg the title of Hofmann.
Gentleman of the court? What did that mean practically?
It came with benefits. A stipend, like a pension, an allowance for court clothing each year, and significantly, tax-free deliveries of grain and wine, enough to lay comfortably in his final years. It was the establishment acknowledging his contribution, even if they couldn't undo the financial damage Fuss had caused.
A late acknowledgement of the immense value he'd created. And history, of course, has amplified that value enormously.
Massively. Fast forward centuries, and the accolades pour in. Time Life magazine in 1997 called his invention the single most important of the second millennium.
That's huge.
And in 1999, A&E network viewers and U.S. journalists voted him Man of the Millennium. The consensus is pretty clear. His work fundamentally reshaped the world.
Which connects to that powerful quote often attributed to Mark Twain.
Right. Twain basically said, the world we live in today, all its good and all its bad, we owe it to Gutenberg. But he felt the good that came from the invention outweighed the bad 1,000 times. It captures the sheer scale of the transformation.
And his name lives on today in very concrete ways.
Oh, yes. There's the Gutenberg Museum in Mainz, founded in 1900, the Johannes Gutenberg University there. Festivals like the Mainz Johannesnacht celebrate him. Even an asteroid, 777 Gutenberg. And of course, Project Gutenberg, the first digital library, named in his honor. From failed mirror maker to enduring global icon.
When you step back and look at Gutenberg's story, there's this persistent, almost haunting irony, isn't there? The man who invented mass communication left so few personal traces.
It's incredibly striking. We know about his struggles mainly from legal and financial documents, lawsuits, loan agreements, not from him signing his work. Think about it. The books definitely attributed to his press, like the Bible or the later Catholicen Dictionary from 1460. None of them actually bear his name or a date.
No, printed by Johannes Gutenberg on the title page.
Nope. That practice came later, starting with Fust and Schoeffer wanting to claim credit. Gutenberg's own work is anonymous in that sense, which makes definitive attribution for some smaller pieces really challenging for historians. He was invisible in his own product.
And even his final resting place is lost.
He died in Mainz in 1468. He was probably buried in the cemetery of the Franciscan church there, but that church and cemetery were destroyed centuries ago. His grave is gone, lost to time.
Even images of him are suspect.
Completely. The first portrait we have that claims to be Gutenberg, it doesn't show up until 1567, almost 100 years after his death. It's almost certainly just an artist's imagined idea of what this famous inventor looked like. We have no contemporary image of him at all.
So this towering figure is strangely elusive. How does he stack up against other major innovators in information technology historically? Like, say, the inventor of paper.
That's a great comparison. He's often linked to Kai Lun, traditionally credited with perfecting papermaking in China around the 2nd century AD. Kai Lun provided the essential medium, the paper, that Gutenberg's mechanized process needed to thrive in the West.
Paper was the foundation.
Exactly. Some historians even call Gutenberg Kai Lun's spiritual son. It makes sense that in rankings of influential figures, like Michael H. Hart's famous list, they often appear close together. Hart put Gutenberg at number 8. Just one spot below Kai Lun at number 7.
Now, speaking of historical claims, what about the Dutch story? The idea that someone else, Laurens Koster, invented movable type first. Does that hold water?
Ah, the Koster legend. It's a persistent one, especially in the Netherlands, understandably. The story goes that Laurens Janszoon Koster, from Haarlem, was experimenting with wooden or perhaps even cast metal type before Gutenberg.
So is there evidence for it?
Well, there's evidence he experimented. He seems to have tried making molds, maybe casting some type, but here's the crucial difference. There's zero solid evidence that Koster ever actually printed anything substantial using a full movable type system. No surviving books, no clear documentation of a working press.
So maybe early experiments, but not the whole integrated system.
That seems to be the consensus now. Even a very early source, the Cologne Chronicle from 1499, which mentions some simpler, earlier printing attempts in the Netherlands, possibly referring to Koster or similar efforts, still explicitly credits Gutenberg in Germany with inventing the true, refined art of printing as it was then known. The Koster story is mostly seen as a local legend today, lacking the proof Gutenberg's work has.
So Gutenberg remains the key figure for creating the system that actually worked and spread.
Precisely. He combined all the necessary elements, the right alloy, the right ink, the adjustable mold, the press mechanism into a package that was efficient, produced high quality, and could be replicated. That's what made it revolutionary.
Bringing it right up to today, even in our digital world, what's the core relevance of what Gutenberg achieved? What's the through line?
It's really the foundation of all mass communication and, arguably, modern manufacturing. The core idea is interchangeable parts. His metal sorts, the individual letters, were reusable components that could be arranged in infinite combinations to create any text, printed, then disassembled and reused.
That concept goes way beyond printing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's the basis for the assembly line, for standardized components in industry. And his specific breakthrough with the alloy making something quickly, cheaply, and precisely through casting that principle still underlies huge amounts of manufacturing today.
He essentially demonstrated that knowledge, information itself, could be replicated and distributed on an industrial scale.
And that changed everything. It took information out of the exclusive hands of the church and the aristocracy and made it potentially accessible to anyone who could read. That shift powered the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, democracy, you name it. It all has roots back in that workshop in Mainz. #tag outro.
So when you boil it down, the story of Johannes Gutenberg is really about incredible persistence forged in failure. A man from a good family, but blocked from the easy path. A failed mirror salesman facing ruin, who then takes lead tin and antimony and engineers a system that completely remakes human civilization.
Yeah, he succeeded not by inventing just one simple tool, but by mastering this incredibly complex integrated system, combining metallurgy, chemistry, mechanics. It proves that sometimes the biggest revolutions require the kind of deep, systematic, almost industrial thinking to actually take hold and change the world.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you, the learner. We know those big loans from Johann Fuss, the 1600 guilders, were essential to get the Bible printed. But they also led directly to Gutenberg losing everything. Now imagine if Gutenberg had been a shrewder businessman. If he'd managed the money well, repaid Fuss easily. Their partnership might have ended amicably. Maybe Fuss's name wouldn't be nearly as prominent in the story. But Gutenberg's desperate financial situation, his failure, led to first seizing control, forming the first Schuffer monopoly, and, in a way, driving the technology outward through competition and maybe forcing Gutenberg's own later, more modest printing efforts. So here's the question. Was Gutenberg's sheer creative persistence the drive that got that Bible finished against all odds, somehow dependent on the crushing weight of potential failure? Did the agony of his financial precariousness fuel the world-changing success? Something to think about.